Nel nome del Padre, Figliolo, Spirito Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
Okay, thank you all for being here. If you have seen the picture of the program or you got the email, of course, it's the picture that's now all indelibly imprinted in our memory. The picture of Will Smith slapping actor and comedian Chris Rock last Sunday at the Academy Awards ceremony. And I have called this the slap heard round the world, because the Academy Awards has a global audience, and people all over the world watch the Academy Awards. And then, of course, after the Academy Awards, many, many, many more people watch the replay of it. And there has been a conversation all week long going on about that. Chris Rock is a comedian and an actor. He's 57 years old. Will Smith, very prominent actor, very accomplished, many, many, many movies. He's 53 years old. And what had happened, I'm sure I don't have to go into it because I'm sure just about everybody knows it, was that Chris Rock was emceeing at that moment, and he made a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, who was there with a shaved head. And Chris Rock said, "Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2. Can't wait to see it. All right." And I was watching, and I didn't get the joke. I was trying to figure out what this was all about. I had to have it explained to me later. Of course, it references a movie from about 25 years ago called G.I. Jane, which starred Demi Moore, in which she shaved her head. And so much of the movie is with her with a shaved head because she's in the Marines, I believe. And so she's G.I. Jane. And so Chris Rock was making a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head. Now, whether or not Chris Rock knew that Ms. Smith has alopecia, which is an autoimmune disease which makes your hair fall out, it's not even known whether or not Chris Rock actually even wrote that joke, because lots of times these jokes are written by other people. But it really doesn't matter. Will Smith took offense to the joke and walked up and slapped Chris Rock quite hard across the face. And then he went back to his seat, and Chris Rock, reacted, and then Will Smith said, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth." And Chris Rock said, "It was a joke. It was a G.I. Jane joke." And then Will Smith said even louder, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth." And to which Chris Rock said, "Okay." And I watched it, and a lot of the sound got bleeped out, and it took us a while to put everything together and what had happened. And I knew immediately, though, that this was a very interesting thing that was going on, and that I saw it as a teachable moment for many, many people, and for the world, actually, that this is an event that's going on in the world, and we're manifesting it because we're learning something, and we have something to learn. And I believe that the discussion that's been going on all over for the past week is an important thing to be happening, because it's the world discussing how we relate to violence. even simple violent acts like a slap. It's probably easier to talk about simple violent acts like that slap than it is to talk about the war in Ukraine. But Course in Miracles will tell us that they're all equal. Slight irritation hides murderous rage. So in many ways, the slap really isn't any different than the war in Ukraine. The scale doesn't matter. So there's a discussion going on in the world about violence, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was quite turned on. I spoke about it a lot, about the book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, which is an amazing book. And it's a book about how violence has been steadily decreasing in the civilization of human beings for millennia. And it's about all the statistics and all the proof that this is indeed going on. And even though that may not seem obvious or even realistic to people as they look out and see things like the war in Ukraine or Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, the truth is, statistically, it can be proven that the amount of violence that goes on in the world and in people's lives in general has been on the steady decline for millennium, for centuries, certainly over the last few decades. Notwithstanding things like a war coming up, still statistically, we're becoming a much more peaceful people than we ever were in our history. And I actually think this discussion and how this slap wasn't acceptable for so many people is just another indication that that is true. People want to really firmly establish that, violence isn't acceptable. Another thing I thought when I first saw it is that this wasn't probably the first time that Will Smith ever slapped somebody. That I just really had to seriously doubt that the first time you manifest an impulse control problem is when you're about to win an Academy Award for Best Actor and you're being videoed and you're on live TV to a global audience of countless millions of people. I just find it, I just don't believe that that's the first time that something like this happens. So my guess is that this is actually an issue for Will Smith, and my heart goes out to him and to anybody who has issues, and we all have issues. And I really trust that this is going to be a real epiphany for Mr. Smith and dealing with things like this. I know a lot of people just like to criticize the Academy Awards and criticize the actors and say, hey, it really doesn't matter. Why are we so focused in on this? This is meaningless. And there's some people who even believe that the whole thing was scripted, that it was actually something that was planned to increase the ratings of the Academy Awards and to increase the visibility of the Academy Awards because their ratings have been going down in recent years. And so I just want to acknowledge that all of those ideas are out there. I don't believe personally it was scripted, but who knows? I think it seemed pretty genuine to me. And while, yeah, it's Hollywood and, who does care really? Again, as I said, it's something we're manifesting in the dream of life. And it is something that we can learn from, and it is something that I think we are learning from. A Course in Miracles says, anger is never justified. Attack has no foundation. So, A Course in Miracles is really very clear about anger, about attack, that there is no foundation. And people will frequently say, well, what about self-defense? What if somebody's, attacking you? Course in Miracles says this: when you think you attack in self-defense, you mean that to be cruel is protection. You are safe because of cruelty. You mean that to believe to hurt another brings you freedom. And so those things can never be true. Cruelty is never going to be something that makes us safe, and hurting somebody is never going to be something that increases our freedom in any way. So A Course in Miracles is very clear on this and very absolute about this. And, that being said, we're people and we slip. And we do things out of our ego and they don't work particularly well. While millions and millions and millions of people have been watching the slap, can't imagine how many views the slap has gotten. I think it's actually much more useful to watch Will Smith's acceptance speech when he won the Oscar for Best Actor that happened just a few minutes later. Ironically, he wins the Oscar for Best Actor and gets to go up on stage and give his acceptance speech. But if you watch the acceptance speech, it's just a couple minutes long, you see the confusion and the sadness, and he's crying, and he's trying to explain, and he's trying to maybe justify, but he's also filled with all kinds of remorse and regret. It's actually pretty painful to watch. My heart went out to Will Smith while he was doing that, and he was, trying to honor, the tennis players, the Williams sisters, and you could see the look on their face when they panned up to them in the crowd, and everybody was confused and not knowing quite how to react. And this is what happens when we give in to the ego and we attack people. Maybe there was a moment where it felt good for Mr. Smith, but then the consequence of it afterwards is terrible and devastating. And I think if you watch the acceptance speech, you definitely get to see this. So violence doesn't work. Then at the acceptance speech, I believe, Will Smith says that in the interim, Denzel Washington, a fellow black actor, very accomplished, had told Will Smith, apparently, at your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. Okay, let me repeat that. At your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. So that's what Denzel Washington told Will Smith after the slap and the shouting of the obscenities. And Will Smith was riding a high. Not only did he have this wonderful acclaimed movie that he was about to win an Oscar for, he also has a #1 best-selling book out there called Will. And, that's been real popular. It's a wonderful thing. If you look at the back cover of his book, Will, it says this: Will is the story of how one person mastered his own emotions, written in a way that can help everyone else do the same. Again, kind of ironic, considering that in this one moment, he wasn't able to master his emotions. Later, of course, he's issued several apologies. He apologized to the Academy and the other nominees when he was accepting his award. Didn't apologize to Chris Rock until a day or so later. And then an official statement, I think just from a day or two ago, he said, I was out of line and I was wrong. I am embarrassed, and my actions are not indicative of the man I want to be. There is no place for violence in a world of love and kindness. So, he's doing his best to take responsibility and own up to everything and learn from it. Let's hope. Course in Miracles also says no one attacks without intent to hurt. This can have no exception. Course in Miracles is challenging all of our views about anger, about attack, that it's always because we want to hurt. It's always because we want somebody else to feel guilty, and it is never justified, even when it appears to be in self-defense. And as I said, we're just still in the midst of this war in the Ukraine, and people being so, upset about that. I know it upsets me. It's something in the world that just doesn't feel right. Regardless of how someone feels about Russian President Vladimir Putin, pretty much everybody doesn't feel good about Putin, attacking and sending troops into the Ukraine and causing so much destruction and death. Everybody, feels bad about that. But as I said, it's difficult to talk about that. It's so huge. But then this incident with Will Smith and Chris Rock, we can talk about. It brings violence down to a scale that enables us to really have a meaningful conversation. But let's remember that this meaningful conversation that we are currently having about violence has global implications, and has implications even with things like the war in the Ukraine. When Will Smith got up and gave his acceptance speech, he got a standing ovation. And a lot of people have criticized the Academy and the people there for giving him a standing ovation, that he shouldn't be honored in that way. And so they've been talking about that. I actually saw that really, really differently. What I saw was that people in the audience recognized that Will Smith was probably hurting and that it was a call for love, just like A Course in Miracles talks about. And so they were giving Will Smith the love that they intuitively knew that he needed at that moment. That it was actually a very loving gesture on the part of all those gathered there to give this person who was going to obviously be in pain the love that he would need to help him heal the pain. And I felt actually good about that the audience was responding in a way that A Course in Miracles talks about. They were seeing it as a call for love. A Course in Miracles says that is the ultimate value to you in learning to perceive attack as a call for love. So the audience actually was doing that. They saw it, and so they gave the love. And basically were telling him that they loved him, that they were forgiving him, and I think that was a good thing. I've never particularly been a fan of Chris Rock. I think his humor is a little crude and vulgar frequently, but my opinion of him went up a lot after the Oscars. For one, after the second time Will Smith shouted, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth," he just said, "Okay, I will." And it reminded me of something from A Course in Miracles, which is if your brothers ask you for something outrageous, do it because it doesn't matter. So Will Smith was demanding something, asking for something, and Chris Rock was just very willing to say, okay. I also really liked that Chris Rock didn't press charges against Will Smith. Apparently the police were there ready to take Will Smith into custody, but Chris Rock said, no, we're just going to let this go. But I also really just loved the fact, and admired Chris Rock for just being able to continue on right after he'd been slapped. I mean, he was obviously a little shaken, but he just continued on, very professional, did the job that he was there to do. And I thought that was really, really tremendous. And as I said, my opinion of Chris Rock has gone up. People in Hollywood, talk about memes and topics, toxic masculinity. We hear that a lot, that masculinity is toxic. And there was a real demonstration right there of a little toxic masculinity. I haven't heard too many feminists really talk about how, the strangeness and the inappropriateness of a man feeling like that he has to defend his wife's honor in some way. But that comes to mind too. What also comes to mind is, what if Will Smith had been a white actor and had done that? If a white actor had gone up and slapped a black host, we would be having an entirely different conversation right now. And there's also the idea that, one of the bad stereotypes that we have about African Americans or black people is that their culture is more violent and they're more prone to violence. And, there we got this demonstration. You also hear a lot about, okay, black people are the victims or the on the receiving end of violence by white people, but they're really on the receiving end way more on violence perpetrated on them by fellow black people. So the whole incident of black on black violence, and there's another, wonderful visual of that. So this whole thing is really rich with all kinds of things we can talk about. And while some people, as I said, have criticized this discussion that we're having, I think it's a great discussion. And I think it's a discussion that we need to have as a culture. What about these things? What about men defending women's honor? I mean, how strange is that? And what about not being able to control your impulses? So I actually think it's a good thing. And I think that one of the reasons we're having such a vivid and energized and interesting conversation about it is just because as the culture and society as a whole enlightens, and I think we are enlightening, we become increasingly sensitive to things that we might have ignored just a few years ago. Of course, as the mind becomes increasingly sensitive to what it would once have regarded as very minor intrusions of discomfort. So a number of years ago, this would have been a minor thing, but because of where we've evolved, this has become a major thing. Another thing I think that's it's being discussed a little bit, and it's an interesting discussion to have, is about comedy in general. I mean, the Oscars have been full of this kind of comedy for years and years, where hosts say derogatory things about their fellow actors. As a matter of fact, Chris Rock said something much worse about Jada Pinkett Smith when Chris Rock was the host of the Oscars in 2016. So there's a little history here of Chris Rock insulting Jada. And so, is this stuff really funny? I mean, we've accepted that as humor, and we accepted that that is what comedians do. But is this a teachable moment for comedians as well to rethink the comedy? I mean, is comedy at the expense of other people really funny? So that's a good conversation for us to have. And I think Mr. Smith, Will Smith, I love him. I forgive him. I think people are going to forgive him, especially if he continues on the path that he is currently on, which is taking responsibility and making it a learning for himself. So I embrace the fact that this was the slap that was heard round the world. And I embrace the fact that a wonderful conversation is going on about so many things that we need to talk about. And I see it as part of the evolution of our society and our culture and of the human race towards a more peaceful, loving people. Okay, that's my talk for today.
In nome del Padre,
Thank you very
Figliolo,
much.
Spiritu Santo. Amen.
Such a separation.
Have you been lonely? Have you been sad? How does it feel to lose such a close one? Have you been mad?